Hi everyone and welcome to a new video on the CBI channel. In this Django for Beginners tutorial series, we're creating a web application that displays blog posts to the different users. And it allows users to sign up and sign in and also to create, edit, and also delete different blog posts. Now, this is not the first video in this series. In fact, we've already done 8 videos before, which results in our application looking like this, where we have a navigation menu, a home and a my blog post menu, and we have the ability to create different posts in our app. Now in this video, we want to continue and want to make sure that all of the blog posts that we create through the form are being displayed on our homepage in a news article style way, so that the users can see which posts are on our website. Now to do that, we need to do a few things. First, we need to make sure that we can query the data from our database into our view. Then we want to bring that data from our view to the template and display it on the page. Next, we want to make sure that it actually looks like news articles, so we're going to be applying some styling so that our blog posts are appearing as they should. And as a last step, I'm going to show you how you can slightly change the query so that we can display our latest posts first. So we are now in our code and we want to make sure that all of the data that we store in this blog post model is actually being loaded into our view of our homepage. And then we want to bring it from the view of the homepage to the actual HTML page called home. Now, if I check the content of my database in the DB browser, I notice that we have one blog post at the moment. So the first thing that I want to do is make sure that we can load this information into our view and display that on the homepage. To do that, we're going to go to our views.py file and then to the view for home. Now, loading these blog posts is actually really easy. First thing that you want to make sure is that from the models, we import blog posts because we need to get data from this model that we defined inside of our view. Then what we can do is we're just going to get rid of the title for now because that's not going to be very relevant. And on the top, we can say that we are going to creating a variable called blogs. And in here, we're going to write the query that fetches the data from the blog post model. Now to do that, we can do blog post, which is the name of our model. And then we do dot objects, and then we do dot all. Now what this will do is it will just go to this model and it will fetch all of the rows for the blog post model. Now, if you only want to load a subset, you could also change this to dot filter and then apply different filter criteria on the columns to only get the results that you would like. And we will also do that in one of the next videos. But for now, we just want to get all of the blog posts in the model. So we do dot all. Now we want to make sure that this variable called blocks is going to be available inside of our HTML template. Now to do that, we can put it inside of the context because everything that we put in the context is being shipped to the home.html page. So we can say that we want to call something called blocks, and the content of that name of blocks is going to be blocks. And now I can use this name inside of the HTML template to get all of the results. So let's now save this and make sure that we can use blocks inside of our home.html page. So we're now on the home.html page and we currently have a title on the top and also link to the blog post page. So for now, I'm going to get rid of everything that is in here and I'm just going to make sure that we have one div on this page. And now we can display our blog post on this page. Now, simply I can put something called blogs in here and then save this. And then we can open a terminal to start our server and we do venv/scripts/activate to activate the virtual environment. And then do python manage.py run server to start the server. And if we now go to our application, you can see that we see the query set and that we have the blog post of my blog post title. And that is also what we saw in the database, because that is where blog post title exists. Now, of course, over the course of users creating much blog posts, we will have a lot of data there, and it doesn't really display it correctly or nicely in here. So what we actually want to do is we want to loop over all of the blogs that we have, and for each of the blogs, display them as a news article. So to show you what that can look like, we can go to our home.html file, and in there we can say that we want to have some square brackets and some percentage signs. And we can say that for each of the block in blocks, so this is the actual variable, and this is what we call each of the iterations in it. We can say that we want to have a p tag, and inside of this p tag, we can say that we want to have 2 times the square brackets, and I want to get the block dot title. And then we also need to close off this tag, so I can say some square brackets and a loop end for, which is going to close the loop of the blocks. So what this should do is it should go through all of our rows. For all of the rows in the blocks, it should create some text for the title. So if I now save this and we go back, you notice that we have my blog post title. We also have an additional thing here that we can get rid of. So now this last arrow is gone. And now if we would create more blog posts, so I would say this is the second blog post that we have, and I say this is the content of the second blog post, and we post this, we can now go to home and we get the two titles. So it does what it needs to do. And this method within this p tag to get the block, the title, will also work for all of the other fields that we have. So for example, if we go to the models.py, you notice that we also have columns for content, created on and modified on. So if I would go to the home.html file and I would just copy it over, and we can then say that we also want to see block.content, and we also want to see created on and also the modified on. And if we now go here, you will notice that we get the exact data in there. So we have this first one, which has a created date and a modified date, and also the second one with a created date and a modified date. So now we can apply some styling to make sure that this information pops up like it's actually a news article. First thing, what I will do is we're going to go to the code that we have, and we're going to be copying over some stuff from the blog post page. Because in here, we already have this nice looking main container that we created in the previous video. And we can reuse this for this video, of course. So we put in the code with the main container. And the change that we're going to be making is that this is not going to be called blog posts of user one, but we say welcome to our blog. And we can also get rid of the link. And now in this div, we already have space for all of our blog posts. So I'm just going to copy over this thing and paste it here. And now this is going to be the space where our blog posts are ending up. And let's save that. And now we already have a dedicated container for our blogs. So now we want to have article by article some nice looking formatting. So let's get started with that. So first thing that we will do is we're going to create a container for each of the articles. So here it says for blog in blogs. And we can state that for each of the blogs that we have, we are going to create a div, and that class is going to be equal to article. Now inside of each of the blog posts, I'm going to have two sections. On the left-hand side, I want to make some room for an image. And on the right-hand side, I want to have the actual content or a card that displays the title, the created date, and then all of the content. So what we'll do is inside of this div called article, we're going to create two other divs. So the first div, we can give it a class name, and I'm going to set that equal to article image. And that is going to be the room where we display the images. Then we also have a div, and that is going to be equal to the class name equal to article content. And there we want to have all of the content. Now, of course, the current content that we want to show are going to be the title, the content itself, and a created on date. So the first thing that I want to do on top of here is I'm going to create an h2 tag, which is basically a title. And in there, we're going to be showing the blog.title. And then below it, I want to have the date that we have created the article. So in this instance, we can just copy over the created on tag. The only difference here is that I'm going to make this a div instead of a paragraph. And then below the created date, we want to have the content. And the content can be in a paragraph title. Now, actually, the modified on is not that relevant for me, so we can get rid of that. So let's just do it like this. And let's save that. Now, of course, currently this will not look good, but at least we now have differences between the titles. So let's apply some styling so that we will have a block on the left, which will just have a background color, which resembles the images that we'll add later. And then we can also make sure that there's a little bit more styling on these items. So we're first going to apply some styling on the actual article itself, so that it also impacts these items below it. So in our main.css file, we are going to go to the bottom of this file. We do .article. Now in there, we are firstly going to specify that we want to have a display of flags, which is going to make it a little bit responsive. And we are going to say that we also want to have, as a first thing, a border on the bottom. And we want it to be 1 pixels wide. And the color is going to be equal to hashtag EEE, which is just some kind of a grayish color. And it actually needs to be 1px solid, otherwise we don't see a line at all. And if we now refresh this, you will notice that we have some kind of a boundary between the posts. So that seems to be working fine. Next, we are going to set something called gap. So we can do gap and set it equal to 24 pixels. Now let's save that. And now when we refresh this, you notice that this spacing becomes a little bit different. There's some kind of a margin being applied right there. But we want even more margins because currently the margins are only on the sides. So what I will do is I'm going to set a margin and we then do 32 pixels and then we set a 0. Now what this will do is it going to add 32 pixels of space above and below our element, but not on the sides. So this one will do the sides and this one will do the top and the bottom. And if I now do this, it gets spaced out even further, but then on the bottom and the top. Now actually I want a little bit more padding down the bottom as well, because there doesn't really seem to be much room after the last sentence of the content before the line starts. So we can do some padding, but only on the bottom, and that can be 24 pixels. And that should give us a little bit more room on the bottom for articles. So that is fine like this. For now we have the article all styled, but if we go then one level down, we can get started with the article image, because later on there will be an image in here. So we can copy this over and also style the image part, because currently we don't see anything next to our blog posts. So we're going to go to the main.css on the bottom and do .article image. And the first thing that we're going to be putting in here is something called flex. And that flex is going to be equal to 0, 0, and then 180 pixels. Now you might wonder, what does this do? Well, basically within the display of flex, when you make your screen smaller, it will automatically resize all of the items within it. And what flex does, it is going to make sure that the image is always going to stay 180 pixels. Doesn't matter what happens to the container, it will always remain that size. Now, since we don't actually have an image right now, I'm also going to set a background color. And this background color is going to be some kind of a light gray, just so that we have an idea of what the area will look like. And when we now refresh the page, it looks like this, where we have a image box next to the actual title. And later on, we will render actual images in here and it will look better. But for now, this gives you an indication of what this will look like. So it actually starts looking like a blog post site. So this is already quite good. Now let's also format the date a little bit, because the title is quite okay for now, but the date is formatted like August 8th, 2025 with the time also in here. But I'm actually not really that interested in the time. I just want to know the date. And also I want to format it a little bit. So first things first, we can go to the home.html page And in there, we want to provide a class for the created one. So we say class equal to, and let's just do article date. And then we can use article date to set some properties for the date. So we can go to the main.css file and on the bottom do .article date to target that specific class. And I'm going to change firstly the color. I'm going to set it to hashtag 888, which is a grayish color so that the date doesn't show up that dominant. Also, I want to add a little bit of a margin below the date. So we do a margin bottom and we set that to 8 pixels so that there's a little bit of room under the date before the content comes in. And if we now refresh this, it looks a little bit better, where we have a grayish date like this and a little bit of room underneath before the content hits. Now, I want this date to not look like August 8th, 2025, including the time, but I just want to have the date and also the year. Now, changing the way that dates look in the Django template is actually quite easy. And here's a great article by Simple is Better Than Complex, also has a very great YouTube channel. And there you can notice that we can manipulate the dates by simply putting date and then define some letters which tell us something about the date. So as an example, if you would do a slash and then date, and then would only do the capital Y, then that should mean that we only get the year with 4 digits. So if we go to our home.html page and I would do the colon and I would say date and then a colon and then would only specify a Y in a capital, that means that we only get 2025 right here. So if I would want to have the month, so the full month, I can just do a capital F as well. So I can go back and I would say, well, I would like to have a capital F, then a comma, and then a Y. And now you can see that it says August 2025. So that is the way that we can construct a date based on a date field. So of course I will leave this in the description because you can just use these letters to construct the way that you want your dates to look. But in my case, I am going to be using, first of all, the capital F. Then I'm going to do a J, and then we do a comma and a space and the year. And that will look like this, where we have August, then the day, and then the year, because that is enough for me. And you can also see that right here that indeed corresponds to the day of the month without the leading zeros, the month actual in a long format, and then the year with 4 digits. So that is now looking nicely. Now, of course, in our current way, the blog posts that we have are not that long because we just have my blog post content. But you can imagine that blog posts can get quite big. And we might want to limit the text a little bit so that we don't have the full article right here, but we can just let users click read more to get to the details of the article. So let's check out what it looks like when we make our blog post a little bit longer. So right now I'm in my Django admin portal and I'm logging in with the user that we created in a few videos ago. And now we can go to blog post. We can go to this is the second blog post that we have. And I'm just going to copy this over and over and over again so that we have a very long blog post. Not the nicest blog post, but it will help us here. And now we can save this. And now if I go back here, you can see that this is a really long blog post and we don't actually want that. So to stop that, we can actually do something similar as what we did here. And by blog.content, we do this colon again. And then we set truncate cars. And then we do 200. Now let's save that. And that will make sure that it only shows the first 200 characters. So it's not going to show more. And that way our blog post will not be fully shown here. And of course, you can edit that number to whatever you want. Now we also notice that the image becomes bigger if the text becomes bigger. So let's also quickly make sure that that does not happen. So we can go to the main.css file and I'm going to set the article image to a max height of 120 pixels. And now it will just remain like this so that the images are the same size in all of the different categories. Now, the last thing that I also want to do is I want to order my blog post correctly, because now you can see that the one from August 8th is the first one, but I actually want the latest one to be on the top. Now, doing that is very easy. We can go to the views.order by file, and we can add something after the all statement, because we can just do order by. And we want to order it by the created on, because we want to have the latest created on there. Now, this thing right here, make sure that we get the latest one first. If I would remove this, it would get the oldest one first. So if we do it like this, it will sort it descending. And now when we refresh this, you can see that August 11 is the one that stays on the top. Now, one final thing that we want to do is make sure that this page also looks nice when there are no blog posts. And to illustrate that, I'm going to delete those two blog posts that we have right now. So if I just say in this database that we want to delete both of those records, and we are going to write the changes on the top, that means that there will now be no data in the blog posts model. And going to our blog post page, and I'm now refreshing it, it will just show welcome to our blog, but it doesn't provide any information about the number of articles. So let's quickly change that. So the first thing that we would like to know is how many blog posts we actually have in our database, because then we can write some logic that if we have 0 blog posts, we also let the user know that there are no blog posts yet. So we're going to go to our views.py file, and we can add something in the home view. We can say blogs count. And then we can do blogs.count, and that will count the number of blog posts that we have in our database. And then we can also bring that to our front end by saying that blog count is equal to blog count. And now when we go to our home.html page and I put in a separate div, I can just say that I want to show the blogs count. And if we refresh this, you notice that we see a 0 because there are currently no blog posts. So that means that we can now write some logic that if there are 0 blog posts, we can show that as text. And otherwise, we just show all of the blog posts that we have. So we can get rid of the blogs count. And here we can write an if statement. So we can do some squirrely brackets and some percentage sign. And we can say if the blog count is equal to 0, then we just want to render a p tag. And we want to say there are no blog posts yet. And then we can also say that if it is not equal to 0, so else, we want to do this looping over all of the blocks. And then the only thing we need to provide on the total end of this whole thing, so right here, is and the if statement. And let's also put the s here because it's blocks count and not blog count. And now when we refresh this page, you will notice that it says there are no blog posts yet. So the user knows that there's nothing yet. And if we create a blog post, so we again say, this is the first blog post, and then we can just say, this is the content of our first blog post, and we submit this, we can go home and we will notice that the first blog post is here. So that will let the user know that this all works. Now, for now, this is all we're going to be doing today, but over the next videos, we're going to add all different kinds of things, such as images, tags, categories, but also the possibility to edit or delete a blog post. And that also means that in the next videos, we will add some more styling and information in these articles based on what we have added. In the next video, we will continue and we're going to make sure that we can edit these blog posts. So that means that we'll also add an edit button and then we can go to the page where we can actually see the content. I want to thank you very much for watching this video. If you've enjoyed it, please leave a like and subscribe, and I hope to see you in the next one. Bye bye.